in-car M3 last drive sync lap. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today, as you can probably tell by the title, is all about saying goodbye to my beloved Portimao Blue G80 M3 competition rear wheel drive. I've had this car for about 9 months and covered roughly 9,000 miles in that time. I've also shot almost 20 videos on this car, so you should be fairly familiar with it. I'm going to put my favourites in the description below just in case you missed some of them. I was originally planning on keeping this car a lot longer and in fact trading it in for when the touring arrives, but the touring is still some time away. I reckon realistically 12 to 14 months away from the UK, and the residuals on this particular car are still very good. A couple of months ago, Tony approached me with the idea to trade it in for an xDrive version and lose very little. After then driving the xDrive version, I realised that it is a better car. It was hard to accept because I absolutely love this car, but in this country, especially in these slimy, wintry conditions, the xDrive is better most of the time. And as you know, you can hit that rear wheel drive button on one of your M settings anytime and turn it into a rear wheel drive M3. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Hopefully you've seen my ordering and speccing M3 xDrive video that I shot with Tony a few weeks ago. If not, there's a link to that just up here. Now that particular car doesn't arrive until sometime in March, and I'm actually handing this car back in a few days' time. Tony's going to give me a very special demo car of theirs in the meantime that will tide me over the next 7 to 8 weeks, which I'm really excited about, and that will obviously be coming to the channel very, very soon. So I figured we'd take it out for one last drive on this glorious, slightly slippery winter's day before returning it to Tony Lewis and Berry BMW in a few days' time, and before this goes back up to Miltech tomorrow to have its gorgeous exhaust removed and the stock one put on. I'm keeping the Miltech exhaust, by the way, and it's going on my M3 competition xDrive when that arrives in a couple of months' time. It's exactly the same fitment, so we're going to have no issues there. And in fact, Miltech are slightly modifying this exhaust to make it a little bit quieter so I don't have any more issues at track days later on in the year with my new M3. As many of you know, I absolutely fell in love with this car the first time I drove it at the UK launch almost 12 months ago. I was slightly worried because I'd ordered this car blind without driving it because, well, it wasn't available at the time. But the second I got behind the wheel, I realised that I'd made the right choice. Well, until I drove the xDrive and realised that that was slightly better in various areas. During my 9 months, I've taken this car on the Spanish Safari petrol head tours, which was almost 3,000 miles. It's done various track days up and down the country, and I've used it for pretty much everything. Daily duties, Sunday morning drives. It really has been my workhorse. And although 9,000 miles in 9 months isn't a massive amount of miles, you've got to remember that I've got my M2 as well, which doesn't get used that much, but I've also got a lot of press cars throughout the year. And in fact, I spent about a total of 2.5 months in Germany last year driving other cars like that brilliant manual M4, where this car was just sitting at home on the trickle charger. So although it's not a massive amount of miles, when I have been here and I haven't had a press car, I've been using this a lot. To me, it feels like I've had this car for a lot longer than 9 months. Aside from the various road trips and track days, etc., that we've already talked about, we've had so many occasions with this car, including the very first time I went to pick it up from Berry BMW in Croydon. I remember when the sheet was pulled off and I saw the Portimao blue and Kyalami orange interior for the first time and absolutely fell in love with it. Even the black wheels, and I'm not the biggest black wheel fan, but I really think they suit this particular car and spec. As talked about in my xDrive speccing video, I would have kept the same spec from my xDrive if I wasn't online, but I wanted to have a car that was quite obviously, or looks quite obviously different to this one. And also when it comes to speccing my M3 Touring, well, I would have lived with a couple of different color options and interior options, so I might have more of an idea of which way that's going to go, because that car is going to be a keeper. And along with the spec reveal on collection day, this car was also wearing its plates, GR11LEZ. A few people, including my mum, were quite confused as to what they meant on collection day, and I'm sure many of you are still confused to this day. Essentially, they're meant to say grills, but that was a lot cheaper on the DVLA website, and they seem to have gone down very well. My collection day wasn't exactly the typical collection day because, well, I did collect this car and I drove it across London in horrible traffic to Brentford, where Ceramic Pro are based, and I left it with them for 5 days. So although I'd just been given the keys to my brand new car, I painfully had to give it to Ceramic Pro for them to do their magic. It was worthwhile though. They PPF the front end and any areas that are prone to stone chips, and they ceramic coated the rest of the car and all the metal work, the carbon roof. In fact, they even did the interior, and I'm really grateful that they did that because, as most of you know, well, I'm not the best at cleaning my cars, and I also use them relatively hard, or as M cars are meant to be used. Shortly after that, I pulled off my P0s and replaced them with Michelin's PS4Ss. These M3s and the new M4s come either with the P0 tyre or with the Michelin PS4S. Your dealer or BMW UK don't have any control over that. It's a bit of a lottery, or a tyre lottery, and as far as I'm concerned, I came out with a slightly shorter straw, but thankfully I worked very closely with Michelin and they were able to give me a set of PS4Ss, which I had on this car. It actually has some fairly worn Cup 2s on it today. I'm going to replace them with the P0s before it goes back in a few days' time. Shortly after that, I took it up to Matt at Suspension Secrets, who played around with the stock geometry. He made a few little tweaks that made a big difference to this car. Out of the box, they're quite nervous. He seemed to tame that down so it's very easy to live with, but he also improved the cars on the limit handling, which is really important because I did lots of track days in this car and it just feels better in general on the road. So I'll be taking my xDrive straight up to Matt once that arrives so he can do the same small tweaks. That's all with factory suspension. He hasn't changed anything there. He's just adjusted what is adjustable underneath the skin, which is really good, and I can't recommend him high enough. And finally, about 3 months ago, I made a trip up to see Miltech Sport to get their full system installed. That has given this car a lot more character, a lot more sound. In fact, slightly too much sound. They're going to dial that back, as we talked about earlier. But yeah, added a lot more presence around the back. The stock exhaust tips are 95mm, and these are frankly ridiculous 115mm. These are the titanium tips, although today they could be made out of anything because the car is absolutely filthy, and I do slightly apologize for that. It's the end of January. I cleaned it 3 days ago and it's just impossible. Even if I cleaned this morning, it would have been covered in grime by the time I got down here, so it was just pointless. And I also thought leaving it this filthy and dirty kind of fitted in well with this video because I'm saying goodbye to it, and that's some of the grime that I've endured over the journey with this car. I will get it properly cleaned before returning it to Tony because, well, that would just be a little bit too rude. Let's jump inside and have a look at the interior and how it's fared over the 9 months. As most of you probably know, I absolutely love the regular 3 Series or 4 Series interior, and the M3 just takes it that little bit more. I love everything in here. The operating system 7 is perfect. Okay, the displays could be better. I wish we had traditional round dials as opposed to BMW's latest funky graphics, but they're not too bad. The head-up display is incredible, and that is standard on the M3 and M4. In fact, these cars do come with a lot of standard equipment out of the box. Let's talk about the steering wheel first, because this is essentially another upgrade that I had done to this M3 in the time I had it. I took it to my good friend Jack at Royal Steering Wheels and he trimmed it in beautiful Alcantara and added a Kailami orange stripe at the top with the traditional M stitching around it. I just love it. He also managed to remove a little bit of padding out of the original wheel, but not much. We're talking probably 5%, but it feels great, and it really did, in my opinion, bring the interior up to another level. I'm really happy with the fact that I went for the carbon bucket seats. As you probably know if you've watched my ordering video for the xDrive, I've also gone for the carbon seats in that car. They do have a couple of negatives, and one of them is they're obviously not going to fit every single shape and size. They fit me very well. And the other main negative really is getting in and out of them is never easy. And it hasn't got any easier during the 9 months of ownership. But I have to say the wear and tear factor has fared really well. I always wear jeans, and I'm always quite clumsy getting in and out of the car because I'm quite a big object, and I always scuff my jeans, whether I'm getting in or out, on these side bolsters, but they're not showing any sign of wear at all, so that's really good. The bolsters up here, well, this one's showing a little bit of wear, but I'm sure that could be very easily fixed, but nothing as bad as I thought they would be this far into ownership. So I reckon even 2 or 3 years down the track, the driver's seat should only show a little bit of wear. Also, the Kailami orange leather, well, I wear blue or black jeans pretty much all the time, and they don't seem to have got into the leather. I haven't cleaned them with anything specific, although I did have them ceramic coated at Ceramic Pro, so that has probably helped things like jean dye getting into the actual leather itself. But in terms of comfort, it's something I get asked all the time. They are so comfortable and they are so supportive, and they are genuinely the best seats in any road car that I've ever experienced, and I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not being a BMW fanboy. They are brilliant, and I wish I could have one of these seats in my M2 competition. In terms of all of the trims, well, they weared really well. The M3 and M4 come standard with this carbon trim, and compared to something like the piano black trim that you get in a lot of BMWs, well, there's absolutely no signs of wear or scratches on this lovely varnished carbon. I'm not particularly rough with it. I don't wear watches or jewelry or bracelets, but I do tend to pick up scratches on piano black BMWs, whereas this one, well, it looks factory fresh from when I collected it, which is a really good thing. And in fact, that goes for everything in here. The wear and tear factor of a BMW cabin is really good, and I think a lot of that has to do with the high quality materials they use. Even if they're plastics, they're high quality, and just the general fit and finish. There's no creaks or rattles or anything in here. It's really well put together. But everything else, I've had rear seat passengers, they've got plenty of room. Arguably, they've got more room back there than if I had a regular 3 Series. And the reason for that is because these carbon buckets, they take up so little interior space. The backs of them are about 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches in terms of their depth. So if you think about that, that is saving rear legroom essentially. So there's plenty of cabin space in here. You could get a 5th passenger on the middle of the bench back there, but you wouldn't want to take them too far sitting back there because it's quite compromised. But it's a very practical and lovely place to spend time in. This has got the HK sound, which again I believe is standard on the M3 and M4, produces very good sound quality. And yeah, I couldn't be happier with this car. I really like it. Perfect driving position, lovely steering wheel, especially now it's trimmed, fantastic infotainment systems, buttons where I want there to be buttons, comfortable and supportive and adjustable seats. It's a nice place. Right, let's get it out on the road because we're quickly running out of light. Although it's a lovely day today, I do keep forgetting that we're near one of the shortest days of the year, and therefore it tends to get dark at about 3:30. So let's go and enjoy the last proper drive in my G80 M3 competition rear wheel drive. Yeah. I guess I have mixed emotions. I am going to really miss this car. I'm going to miss this spec. I love the exterior and the interior, as we've already talked about. But I have something very similar, arguably, well, in my opinion, slightly better, coming in just a couple of months' time. So I can't rest on my laurels too much and get too sad about this. But I have had some great times with this car, and I mean, anyone that doubts the current M3 and M4, well, I get the looks are a little bit controversial, although I think a lot of people are coming around to liking or preferring them in the 11 or 12 months that they've been out. Personally, I didn't mind them from the first time I saw the shots. I think some of the early press shots were pretty bad and taken from the wrong sort of angle. And the more you see on the road, the more you spend with these cars, the more they've grown on me anyway. But I get that looks aren't for everyone, and I'm not sure about the design language of BMWs at the moment. That new XM concept, well, I don't really like the way it looks, and I don't really like what it represents in terms of what the brand or what M stands for. But hey, maybe that's just me. But anyway, back to this car. Let's talk about the couple of negatives that I found in the 9 months of ownership. One of them we've already really talked about is the seats and getting in and out of them. If you do opt for these seats, which I believe are far superior to the standard ones in many areas, they're definitely not superior in terms of getting in and out. And especially if you're the bigger chap, someone like me, big around the belly and bigger in terms of tall, it is slightly tricky to do it in an elegant way. But saying that, if you are a taller chap, they are brilliant because they give you a lower driving position. That's something I've banged on about loads, and being this low, even with a helmet on, as you've seen in many of my track day videos, I have no issues with headroom or driving position. It's just brilliant. Do I keep banging on about how good the driving position is in this car? Well, I will probably say that 50 times more when the xDrive arrives, because they are just brilliant. The other slight negative is something I talked about, in fact, my 3,500 mile review that I shot out in Spain back in June, and that is slight lack in steering feel. And that's nothing new for a modern car. I think Porsche do their EPAS or electric power steering systems the best in terms of giving you back some kind of feel. BMWs of late really don't do a fantastic job. I think the M5 CS that I drove sometime last year, or a couple of times last year, that probably had the most steering feel out of any modern BMW that I've driven, which is ironic because it's obviously a big old 5 Series, but that car, as we know, is an incredible car. So steering feel and slightly dead feel. It just doesn't feel, it feels more like a good sim steering than a real life car steering. We'll just enjoy this next bit of road. It's very slippery outside. I've seen a few cars slip off down there. In fact, you can still see the police tape. And as you come out of here, well, that was literally 15% throttle. And although that's fun, sometimes it does get a little bit scary, and obviously I'm very used to this car, and I have all of the traction control systems switched off all of the time now because I feel really at one with this car. But if you're not ready for that and you've got everything switched off, it can be quite dangerous on the public road in that respect. And obviously the xDrive, well, it's not going to remove all of that, because when you're in rear wheel drive or four wheel drive sport, sorry, it gives you a lovely rear bias feeling and the car doesn't get too sideways, and the minute you counter steer into the slide, it just pulls you out. So on that lovely left-hander that goes uphill, in this car, you're struggling to sort of gain momentum in these conditions. In the xDrive, you've got no issues at all. But that's not to say that I'm having more or less fun in either car. They're just both very different, and the xDrive's definitely more sure-footed during the winter months here in the UK. A couple of weeks ago, I had a notification come up on the operating system 7 telling me that there was an over-the-air software update available. So when I parked up that evening at home, it did the software update whilst the car was locked. Yeah, it was really cool. It took about 25 minutes or so, I believe. What I didn't realise was that software update has basically updated the fake sound that we get in the cabin. Now, for those of you avid watchers of the channel, you'll remember that I described that manual M4 as having a slightly different soundtrack between gears and a bit more overrun sound, and I wasn't sure if it was real or fake. Then when I had that M3 xDrive a few months ago to compare it to this car, well, that also had a completely different soundtrack to this car. So that's when I realised it wasn't the manual box, it was in fact what I could hear being piped around the cabin. Now this car has also got a different soundtrack, and I'm sure that mic's probably not picking it up, but I now have almost like a DSG farting sound on upshifts when I'm in an aggressive mode, and when the exhaust button is pressed, I've got this funny, yeah, it doesn't sound very organic. And in fact, I kind of wish that I had the old soundtrack, which was a lot less intrusive, and obviously with the Miltech exhaust I don't need that fakery piped around the cabin. I need to look into whether that is switchable or not, because maybe it is amongst various menus inside the infotainment system. But otherwise, apart from those small niggles, this car's brilliant. 40 miles to the gallon on a long run, comfortable, the ride quality. Yes, it's not quite regular 3 Series with adaptive suspension, but it's pretty damn good, especially once you've taken the P0s off, because the P0s have got very stiff sidewalls, and although that translates to arguably a slight more steering feel on the turn-in, what it does give you on the UK roads is a very niggly ride. You put the PS4S's on, or these Cup 2s, and the ride quality just improves very, very quickly. Just coming back into this lovely section of road. Let's try third this time out of here. No, it just wants to rotate. Again, that is 15% throttle, maybe even 10. Oh, it's so quick, this car. And yes, I know I recently put up a video of this actual car getting absolutely spanked by the xDrive version. I have to say, since fitting the exhaust, it seems to pick up a lot better. i.e. when I put my foot on the accelerator, it picks up really well. And in fact, that's a complaint that I initially said about this S58, is its low down torque seems to lack sort of below 2,500 RPM. But since putting the exhaust on, it really picks up nice and quickly. I'm not sure if that's a placebo effect, but I really think it makes sense, because it's a lot freer flowing now, and therefore it allows the turbos to spool up a lot faster. Wow, this car. It's just, I've been driving it on and off for the past few hours in these conditions, and yet it still surprises me and just keeps me awake and alive. Am I going to miss this car? Yes, I am. But as talked about earlier on, at the touch of, let's say, an M2 button, I can revert my xDrive into a rear-wheel drive M3 again. And I've seen a few comments and people on some of my M3 xDrive videos saying, yeah, but when you're in rear-wheel drive, you can't play with the traction control system, which really confuses me, because if you're wanting your xDrive to go into rear-wheel drive, then surely you don't want any traction there. Otherwise, just leave it in xDrive. So I don't see what that argument is. Guys, thanks a lot for watching this video and coming on this M3 rear-wheel drive journey with me. I really enjoyed my time with this car. I am going to miss it, but I'm getting something that's even better in less than a couple of months' time. And in the meantime, I'm also going to pick up a very special demo car from Tony Lewis, which I can't wait to get my hands on. It's a BMW that I wouldn't ever think about buying myself, but it is a model that I haven't spent much time in. It has a B58 in it. It might or might not be tuned by AC Schnitzer. I'm not going to give away too much, but I am looking forward to running that car for the next 6, 7, 8 weeks. I really am. It's something very different in the garage, and it's something that will be enjoyable on days like today. Take it easy, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you at the next video very, very soon.